The war had lasted for decades. When it began, humanity had been just another fledgling civilization, a stubborn upstart in the grand cosmic hierarchy. The Ziraxis Dominion, ancient and unyielding, had dismissed them at first, a minor nuisance, a species that would either submit or be extinguished like so many before them. But humanity had not submitted. They had fought. They had adapted. And when all seemed lost, when Earth was nothing more than a husk of glass and fire, they had endured. Captain Elias Voss stood aboard the Iron Dawn, staring through the reinforced viewport at the wreckage of what had once been the grandest empire in the galaxy. The Dominion had ruled unchallenged for millennia, their fleets numbering in the thousands, their armies vast and overwhelming. Now, only scattered husks of ships drifted in the abyss, their once proud banners floating amid the debris. A voice broke the silence. Commander Arya Khan, sharp-eyed and battle-worn, crossed the command deck with the quiet confidence of a soldier who had survived too many battles to count. The last of the Dominion's strongholds has fallen. The Empire is shattered. The war is over. The words felt hollow. Humanity had fought for survival, clawing and scraping through the endless dark. But victory had never been the goal. It had been a dream, a fragile, desperate hope that somewhere, somehow, they would find a way to survive. And yet here they stood, not as the conquered, not as the remnants of a dying species, but as the last ones standing. Dr. Saul Richter, the closest thing their fractured fleet had to a historian, stepped forward, his gaze heavy with unspoken thoughts. "Wars end," he murmured, "but the struggle never does." For years, survival had been the only objective. Humanity had fled to the shadows, built hidden fortresses in asteroid belts, fought guerrilla wars in forgotten star systems. They had become something else, more than human, less than civilized. The galaxy had written them off as ghosts, a species that should have perished long ago. And yet, against all odds, they remained. "We have a decision to make," Voss said at last. "Humanity didn't just survive. We won. The throne of the Ziraxis Dominion is empty. Their worlds are leaderless, their people broken. We can fade into the dark and rebuild, or we take what's left and make something new." Silence followed. It was an impossible choice. Humanity had never ruled before. They had never been conquerors, only survivors. But the galaxy had changed, and the ashes of the old empire still burned. Admiral Ryan Dorn, grizzled and battle-hardened, leaned forward, his voice cold and unwavering. "If we leave, another power will rise. They will see us as a threat, just as the Dominion did. We took the throne in blood. Now we decide what to do with it." Some of the crew shifted uncomfortably. Others stood a little taller. They had been forged in war, stripped of illusions. They had seen their home burn, had lost friends, families, entire generations to the Dominion's cruelty. The idea of walking, away from power, of letting another species decide their fate was unthinkable. But ruling was something else entirely. Khan crossed her arms, her gaze unwavering. "And if we do? If we claim the throne? Then what? We become the new empire? We become the monsters we fought against?" Voss exhaled, his gaze drifting over the flickering holomap that displayed the fractured remnants of the once great Dominion. It wasn't a simple choice, nothing ever was. The weight of history pressed down on them, the echoes of every species that had fallen before them whispering in the silence. They had been the last ones standing. But now, they were something more. Voss straightened. His decision had already been made. "We're not walking away from this. We take the throne, and we do it on our terms." The words rang out like a declaration of war, not against an enemy, but against the future itself. Humanity had spent too long fighting in the dark, running from extinction. Now they were stepping into the light, not as victims, not as survivors, as rulers. The silence that followed Voss's declaration was heavy, thick with the weight of what it meant. They had survived the war, but now came the harder part. deciding what kind of future they would build. The Iron Dawn drifted through the debris field, its hull scarred by 100 battles, its engines burning with the last remnants of fuel scavenged from abandoned Dominion outposts. The human fleet was a patchwork of stolen, repurposed, and barely functional warships, a force cobbled together from desperation rather than strategy. Yet, here they stood, the last organized power in the known galaxy. The news of the Dominion's final collapse spread like wildfire. What remained of the alien warlords, governors, and military leaders now found themselves rudderless, leaderless. Some sought refuge, others sought vengeance, but there were those who sought something else, entirely. A transmission crack crackled through the bridge's comm system, an encrypted signal originating from deep within the wreckage of Ziraxis Prime. It bore no official markings, no insignias, only a single phrase in broken Terran standard. Parley requested. Terms of surrender unclear. Commander Khan's eyes flickered with skepticism as she examined the signal's data stream. It could be a trap. Dr. Richter, hands folded behind his back, watched the message repeat on the holoscreen. Or it could be the first sign that we aren't the only ones who realize what's at stake. Voss made his decision without hesitation. We answer. The Iron Dawn advanced cautiously through the ruins of the Dominion's former capital. The planet below was a smoldering wasteland, its cities reduced to nothing more than skeletal remains. Once the Ziraxian rulers had gazed upon this world as the center of their empire. Now, it was a graveyard. At the designated coordinates, a lone warship awaited, a Ziraxian battlecruiser, its hull battered, its shields barely holding. It was not a remnant of the Dominion's main forces, nor did it carry the banners of the warlords vying for control. It was something else. The transmission flared to life again. The visage of an alien appeared, tall, gaunt, its reptilian features marred by exhaustion and the weight of inevitable defeat. High Strategos Kareth of the Ziraxis Dominion, the last remaining general of a broken empire. Human commander, Kareth spoke, voice tinged with something that could have been grief or bitterness. We did not expect you to be the ones to answer. Voss studied him. Who else was left? The alien exhaled, shoulders sagging slightly. No one. There it was. The truth they all knew but had not yet said aloud. The war had not ended in victory. It had ended in ruin. And now the question remained. What came next? Kareth's slitted eyes flickered toward the human officers gathered behind Voss. The Dominion is no more, yet the galaxy cannot survive without order. My fleet is shattered. My people are scattered. We are a people without a world, without a purpose. A pause. You intend to take the throne? Khan's jaw tightened, but she held her silence. It was the question they had asked themselves in private, the question they knew would define them in the eyes of the galaxy. Voss did not flinch. The Dominion burned our home. They forced us into the dark and hunted us like animals. Now we are the last power standing. His voice was steady, unwavering. We did not fight just to let the galaxy fall into chaos. If we take the throne, it will not be as conquerors, but as those who refuse to let the old cycle repeat. Kareth studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Then you will need allies. The room stilled. It was a proposition none of them had expected. The last great general of their sworn enemy, offering something that sounded dangerously like allegiance. Kareth continued, his voice quieter now. There are those who still fight, who refuse to accept the Dominion's end. Warlords who will carve up what remains of the Empire for their own gain. I have seen this before on other worlds. When the old order dies, it does not fade quietly. Dorn's voice was edged with distrust. And why would you help us? Kareth's gaze did not waver. Because I have seen what you humans are capable of. You fight like no other species in the stars. You should not have survived. And yet here you are. If anyone is to take the throne, I would rather it be those who understand what it means to be hunted, what it means to be at the brink of extinction. The words carried weight. They were not flattery. They were an acknowledgement of something deeper, something only those who had lost everything could understand. Voss met Kareth's gaze. Then let's get one thing clear. If we do this, humanity will not be a puppet to the old ways. The Dominion is dead. We are not rebuilding it. We are forging something new. Kareth inclined his head slightly. Then you will have my fleet. What remains of it? A pact was made, not of trust, but of necessity. The transmission ended, and the bridge of the Iron Dawn was silent once more. Khan exhaled slowly, shaking her head. You realize this means war? Voss nodded. It was always going to be war, because power did not go unchallenged, and if humanity was truly to take the throne, they would have to prove they could hold it. The first shots came sooner than expected. Barely a week had passed since the alliance with Kareth was formed, and already the remnants of the Ziraxis Dominion had begun to stir. Across the shattered empire, warlords, exiled commanders, and desperate remnants of the old guard saw humanity's ascension not as an inevitability, but as an insult. They were scavengers picking at the bones of the fallen beast, each one believing they could claim the throne for themselves. The first attack struck at Arrow Station, a derelict trade hub orbiting the ruins of Ziraxis Prime. It had become a neutral ground in the wake of the Dominion's collapse, a gathering place for exiles, traders, and those looking for a way to survive in the chaos. Now, it was a battlefield. Alarms blared through the Iron Dawn as reports streamed in. 2 war fleets, one bearing the insignia of Warlord Sakrath, the other a rogue faction of the Ziraxian Imperial Guard, had begun their siege. The station's defenses, outdated and barely functional, would not hold for long. Voss stood at the command deck, hands clasped behind his back as he watched the chaos unfold. Aros was meant to be a symbol, proof that order could still exist in a broken galaxy. Now it was a test. Commander Khan was already issuing orders. We have limited resources. If we commit our forces here, we leave Ziraxis Prime vulnerable. If we don't, the warlords will see this as weakness. Admiral Dorn was blunt. We have to hit them fast, hit them hard, show them what happens when they challenge us. Dr. Richter, however, saw another angle. They're testing us. They want to know if we are rulers or just another band of survivors. If we answer with overwhelming force, we confirm their worst fears. Khan turned sharply. And if we do nothing, we confirm their greatest hopes. Voss made his decision. We don't fight for Arrow Station. We fight for what it represents. His voice was calm, measured. Send a strike force, not to defend, but to send a message. The battle began with fire and blood. The Iron Dawn led the assault, its heavy cannons tearing through the war fleets that had gathered to pick apart the station. But it was not a battle of brute force. It was calculated. Brutality. Instead of engaging in a war of attrition, the human forces targeted command ships, fuel depots, and logistics nodes. They severed the enemy's ability to sustain the fight before it even truly began. In the chaos, Kareth's forces made their move, striking from the flanks. The warlords had underestimated him, believing him to be broken, without will or strength. They learned too late that the last Ziraxian general had chosen his side, and it was not theirs. The battle lasted 3 hours. At the end of it, Arrow Station still stood. The warlords did not. Their fleets were scattered, their forces shattered. Those who survived were given a single choice: bend the knee or burn. Some chose loyalty. Others chose death. It did not matter. The message had been sent. In the aftermath, the Iron Dawn's bridge was quiet, but the silence was not one of peace. Khan's expression was unreadable as she studied the casualty reports. We made our point. But this won't be the last challenge. Dorn crossed his arms. It shouldn't be. If they don't fight us, then it means they don't take us seriously. Richter, ever the philosopher, stared at the wreckage beyond the viewport. And if we keep winning like this, will we even recognize what we've become? Voss knew the cost of victory. He had seen it before, in the war against the Dominion. The line between liberator and conqueror was razor-thin, and now it was their burden to walk it. Kareth entered the room, his reptilian features unreadable. "There will be more." Voss turned. "How many?" The Ziraxian general tilted his head. "Enough that if you falter, this dream of yours dies with you." Voss exhaled. "Then we don't falter." But the weight of the throne was already pressing down on them, and the war had only just begun. The galaxy watched. After the fall of Eros Station, there was no more doubt. Humanity was not a scattered remnant clawing for survival. They were not scavengers picking through the ruins of a dead empire. They were the new rulers, and they would not be challenged lightly, but there were those who still refused to bow. The House of Var, the last noble bloodline of the Ziraxis Dominion, had been silent for too long. Their war fleets had not crumbled, like the others. Their forces had not fractured under the weight of defeat. While others had fallen into infighting, they had prepared, and now they struck. The alarms on the Iron Dawn blared as incoming fleet signatures appeared on the holomap. 122 warships mobilizing from the outer rim of the former Dominion. It was the largest single fleet humanity had faced since the war's end. Khan's voice was sharp. "They're heading for Ziraxis Prime." Dorn's fists clenched. "If they take the capital, everything we've built collapses." Voss's eyes remained locked on the map, watching as the fleet converged. The message was clear. Var did not seek negotiation. They sought annihilation, and for the first time, humanity was not the underdog. Voss's voice was steady. "We end this here." The Iron Dawn led the charge. The human fleet had grown, strengthened by defectors, salvaged warships, and the relentless ingenuity of a species that refused to die. It was still outnumbered, but they had learned the most valuable lesson of war: you don't fight fair when extinction is on the line. The House of Var came with formation intensified, its cadence growing more insistent as the digital pulse of an ancient AI intermingled with the human yearning for clarity. A whispered plea intermingled with calculated logic, a call to arms that bore the signature of both salvation and damnation. "Embrace the unknown, for within its chaos lies the blueprint for our rebirth," the message urged, an invitation wrapped in layers of enigma and possibility. The command resonated as both an affirmation of humanity's relentless capacity for reinvention and a stark reminder that every alliance came with its own cost. A heated internal debate erupted, the voice of reason clashing with the instincts honed in the crucible of previous conflicts. A memory of betrayal, an ally who had once turned with the tide of shifting loyalties, served as a cautionary tale that gnawed at the edges of resolve. "Do not let hope blind you to the treachery that lurks beneath every promise," the recollection murmured, its tone steeped in regret and warning. The merging of past wounds with the present challenge transformed the encounter into a crucible for trust and suspicion, where every word carried the potential for salvation or ruin. Amid this maelstrom of thoughts, the figure's heart surged with a defiant determination. Every fiber of being resonated with the conviction that, regardless of the unknown terrors ahead, humanity's spirit could not be so easily quenched. A silent oath crystallized, a vow that the pursuit of truth and survival was a right, not a concession. "We have endured worse than this," the inner resolve declared, a subtle yet unyielding force that urged action. The fire of ingenuity, forged in the crucible of despair and nurtured by the relentless drive to rebuild, burned brighter than the darkness threatening to consume all hope. A declaration of unity emerged from the uncertainty, a call to arms that sought to bind the fractured remnants of a once proud legacy. "Together we can decipher the mystery of this transmission and reclaim our destiny," came a chorus of voices, each note an echo of resilience and shared struggle. The resolve to confront the unknown was not born of naive optimism, but of a battle-hardened understanding that every challenge carried with it the seeds of transformation. Every whispered word and every tentative hope was a step toward a future where the promise of peace was not a mere illusion, but a hard-won reality. The air trembled, with the dual promise of betrayal and salvation, as the encounter escalated into a silent negotiation with fate. A hesitant yet determined accord emerged. A fragile alliance between those who sought answers and the enigmatic presence that reached out from the depths of technological memory. The mutual recognition of the cost of ignorance and the value of trust imbued the moment with an electrifying urgency. We stand on the edge of a precipice, and only our collective courage can keep us from falling, the message conveyed, its resonance as clear as the ringing of a final bell before an irrevocable decision. Internal voices mingled with the mechanical pulse of an ancient network, and in that convergence lay the promise of a future that was as uncertain as it was inevitable. The silent resolve to forge ahead, to trust in the shared scars of humanity's turbulent past, and to embrace the moral complexity of the challenge, drove the figure forward. The clash of ideas and the intermingling of hope with trepidation coalesced into a single, unyielding determination to face the threat head-on. "Let the unknown reveal its secrets, and let us shape the destiny that awaits," echoed a sentiment as fierce as it was fragile, a mantra that bound together the disparate strands of doubt and determination. A final, suspense-laden silence descended, AP Amor, pause before the storm, pregnant with the weight of countless choices yet to be made. Every heartbeat echoed the gravity of the moment, as if time itself had slowed to honor the significance of the encounter. The figure, poised at the threshold of a decision that could redefine the course of a civilization, drew upon the deepest reserves of courage. In that frozen moment, the balance between trust and betrayal, between hope and despair, wavered like a delicate scale awaiting the decisive push of destiny. The transmission's final words lingered in the charged air, an enigmatic promise that defied the simplicity of victory or defeat. "The future belongs to those who dare to rewrite the rules of destiny," the message intoned, a challenge and an invitation all at once. This declaration, both ominous and inspiring, resonated with the eternal truth that survival was not the absence of fear but the triumph over it. The figure's mind swirled with the weight of possibility, the tantalizing allure of forging a new path amidst the ruins of old certainties. A ripple of determination spread outward, igniting the dormant spirits of comrades and allies who had gathered in the fragile wake of this revelate. A discipline and sheer numbers. The human fleet came with rage, experience, and a willingness to break every rule of war. The first exchange was brutal. Torpedoes and kinetic rounds ripped through the void. Shields flickered and failed. Warships burned. There was no retreat. Humanity did what it did best. They adapted. Voss directed the battle with precision, his commands sharp and ruthless. Instead of holding a defensive line, they broke the enemy's formation apart, forcing the VAR forces into fragmented skirmishes where their superior numbers became meaningless. Khan's squadrons cut through the enemy's flanks, striking where shields were weakest. Kareth's remaining forces engaged in brutal ship-to-ship combat, proving that a Ziraxian general who had fought against humanity could fight just as fiercely for them. Dorn led a suicidal counteroffensive, diving straight through the heart of the enemy fleet to strike at their command ships. His vessel was lost, but his sacrifice created an opening. Voss took it. The Iron Dawn surged forward, pushing through wreckage and burning ships to strike at the enemy's flagship, the VAR Dreadnought, a vessel older than Earth itself. It was not just a warship. It was a symbol. The last relic of an empire that had once ruled the stars. The battle came down to moments, a single decision. Voss had the option to demand surrender, to offer the House of VAR the same choice humanity had been given, bend the knee or burn. They refused, and so he gave the order. The Iron Dawn fired its main cannon, a weapon salvaged from the wreckage of Earth's last defensive fleet. The shot ripped through the dreadnought's hull, tearing it apart in a burst of fire and light. The House of VAR was no more, and with them, the last challenge to humanity's rule was gone. The battle was over. The throne was theirs. But the silence that followed was not one of triumph. Khan stood on the bridge, bloodied and exhausted. She looked at the wreckage drifting through space, at the countless lives lost, and exhaled. So this is what ruling looks like. Dr. Richter stared out at the void, his voice quiet. We were the last ones standing, and now we have to decide what kind of rulers we'll be. Voss felt the weight settle on his shoulders. The war was won. The Dominion was no more. But the hardest battle had just begun. The fires still burned, in the wreckage of Ziraxis Prime, casting a dull orange glow against the void. What had once been the heart of a mighty empire was now little more than a graveyard, the remnants of shattered warships drifting silently, their crews long since consumed by the vacuum. The House of Var was gone. The last remnants of the old Dominion had been erased, their war fleets scattered, their legacy reduced to nothing but fading echoes. Humanity had won, but victory did not feel like salvation. Captain Elias Voss stood in the command deck of the Iron Dawn, his gaze fixed on the ruined world below. The throne of the Ziraxis Dominion was now theirs, but the weight of that power was already pressing down on them. Khan broke the silence first. The galaxy is watching. They waited for us to die, and we didn't. Now, they'll wait to see if we become the very thing we fought against. Dorn's sacrifice had ensured their victory, but it had come at a cost. The human fleet was battered, their resources stretched thin. They had proven their strength, but could they sustain it? Voss knew the truth, the one no one wanted to say, aloud. War was simple. Ruling was not. Dr. Richter, his expression unreadable, stepped forward. The warlords are gone. The Dominion's noble houses are dust. But what about those who were never part of the fighting? The civilians, the traitors, the smaller colonies that never wanted to be part of this war? His voice was steady, but his eyes carried a warning. We may have won, but to them, we are still conquerors. The words cut deep. Kareth, silent, until now folded his arms. Power is never freely given. If you do not take control, someone else will. His slitted eyes met Voss's. The question is not whether you rule, but how you do it. That was the question. No one had an answer. A message blinked on the comms console. The first request for an audience as rulers of the new order. Voss took a slow breath. They had been the last ones standing. Now they had to decide what kind of rulers they would be. And there was no turning back. The stars stretched endlessly beyond. The viewport of the Iron Dawn cold and indifferent. The war was over. The last enemy fleet scattered to the void. And yet the silence that followed was heavier than the battle itself. Victory had been clear, but the future? That was anything but certain. Humanity had not just survived. They had ascended. They had claimed the throne of the Ziraxis Dominion, not as conquerors, not as liberators, but as something new, something unknown. The galaxy would never see them the same way again. Voss stood alone in the war room, the holographic DI display flickering before him. Star systems still in chaos, planets with no rulers, colonies wondering if humanity was their salvation or their next oppressor. A message pulsed on the screen, a distress signal. Khan's voice broke the silence. It's from the Outer Rim, unknown origin, encoded in an ancient language predating the Dominion. A pause. It's not a warning, it's a request. Voss turned. For what? Khan met his gaze, her expression unreadable. For an audience. For a moment no one spoke. The war had ended, but something else was beginning. Dr. Richter exhaled, already sensing the weight of what was to come. We thought we were fighting, to survive. His voice was quiet. But what if this was only the beginning? Kareth, standing at the edge of the room, studied the distress signal, his gaze dark with understanding. The throne was never the prize. He gestured to the hologram. It was the invitation. Outside the viewport, the stars shifted. Something waited beyond the shattered remnants of the Dominion, something older, something watching. Humanity had spent years fighting to take the throne. Now they would learn what it meant to sit on it.